Good morning, everyone. I Gisko Bisio, it's good to see guys soon. Tasio Sagai Ganusinia. Hi, everyone. I'm Valiant Bill. I'll be your host for the youth panel this afternoon or this morning. It was only 11 in Saskatchewan, which I know is noon in Winnipeg. um, so I'm very excited. We're going to be speaking today with Curtis Benish and Tristan DeRocher. And our other two participants messaged me this morning, and they're dealing with some unfortunate circumstances. So I'm still going to read their bios, though, really quick before we get into our conversation. So Ali Burnaby was supposed to join us, and she's Mi'kmaq from, I might not say this right, but Listigui. I probably messed that up. But she's one of the youngest elected counselors in her community, and they're currently dealing with some crisis in her community. So she's helping with that. Um, our other participant that was supposed to be here, it was Vincent Short, but he is stuck in school right now. And he said they're having a big meeting and he couldn't get out of bed. So Vincent he's been helping out with social distance powwow. He's one of the youth that's a part of that, and it's a really huge movement. He wanted me to read what it was about. So, in the wake of COVID-19 and the crisis across the world, the Native American and First Nations communities across North America were facing social distancing at its full force, the cancellation of many powwows. These events are more than just dancing and singing. They are a celebration of life, seeing friends and family, as well as offering prayers and blessings. It is meant to So people were facing a lack of income for the year. To combat this, Dan Simmons came up with an idea for online powwow and cyber celebration. On March 16, 2020, Dan founded Social Distance Powwow on Facebook, and it immediately took off. Whitney Rencourt, Crow Creek, Sioux, Dakota, as well as Stephanie Hebert, Mi'kmaq, volunteered to help get this event off the ground, and which now has Vincent Short. Vincent Short comes on and he does these little funny skits once in a while, or she shows us how to drum. And it's really too bad he couldn't be here because I feel like in Indigenous communities, our humor is what gets us through a lot of what we're going through. And so he just embodies this spirit of like that Native humor. So it's too bad he couldn't be here, and I hope school's going good for him. So we'll move on now, and I'll get Curtis and Tristan to introduce themselves.
Okay. Well, my name is Tristan DeRocher. I'm from Buffalo Narrows, Saskatchewan, and I'm a 25-year-old Métis fiddle player, photographer, and writer. But I'm more of like a low-key amateur writer. Like I just write in journals and on Facebook. But I might write a book someday, eventually. But those are my passions. Those are my hobbies. And I currently live in Thompson, Manitoba, where I teach fiddle. And I teach fiddle north of Thompson in 4 different communities: Gillam, South Indian Lake, Lynn Lake, and Leaf Rapids. So I have in total about 380 fiddle students, but because of COVID right now, I can't go see them all. My travel is very limited. My time with the students is very limited, but I do still make my way up there, and I teach full time. So right now, I'm actually just home in Thompson waiting for a COVID test. And when it comes back negative, I'll be back up in the bush out of cell service, fiddling up a storm until springtime.
Tanse Kimosompisu Nitsigasun. My name is Curtis Benish, and I was born and raised in Saskatoon, and that's where I currently come to you today. I am currently a grade 9 teacher, one of the grade 9 teachers of the Neha 9 language and land-based programs at St. Francis Cree Bilingual School. I graduated with my education degree in 2019, and I just recently was accepted into the Indigenous Land-Based Master's Program at the U of S, and that will be starting in July. So now I'm a teacher and a student. I also work for Think Indigenous and help with media management and consulting, and also do some podcasting and a bunch of other stuff. This little side gig stuff here and there, mostly just advocating for Indigenous education and getting back to traditional practices.
Curtis is also a really deadly singer. If we have time, I might make him sing.
Oh.
Okay, so so right now, if you guys can tell me, I know for my reserve right now, which is where I'm staying with my kids, I have 3 kids. School has really been like online. So they have they've tried to go to school, but but then like we'll have an outbreak and then they're back to just online. So I was kind of curious, like, what is it like in the communities you guys are at? And if you're going to post-secondary education, like what's that been like this year?
Would you like me to start?
Sure.
I guess I'll start. Well, I've had a strange experience because I was in Saskatoon. I was at the University of Saskatchewan and I was doing a teaching degree. And then I got offered a job in Northern Manitoba for the Frontier School Division teaching fiddle. And I thought it would be a great opportunity to experience Northern Manitoba and travel and live in a different province for a while, you know? And so I moved here and I worked for 2 weeks when the lockdown began. So I was on my 2nd week of work, just chilling, just getting settled in my office. And then all of a sudden, the superintendent says, okay, on Monday, all of our schools are going to be closed. And from March until June last year, all of our schools were closed. And so this year, it was like, okay, round 2, pandemic, fiddle program, let's see what can happen. And so what happened this time is I said, well, what if I get tested every time I travel north and I don't come home for the weekends and I just stay up there in those little bubbles where they don't have any cases and the schools are still open? So that has been my go-to. But one of our schools had an outbreak during the Christmas holidays. So after Christmas, they were out of commission for months. And I noticed that a lot of our like band run schools, they're kind of like self-governing and they can make their own decisions. So if they want to go into like full lockdown, have a barricade outside of town and only let in essential travel, they do. And so it's kind of been an experience of just knowing what their communities want to do and being okay with that. So yeah, that's me here right now.
Yeah, it's been a very challenging year. And last year was my first year of teaching full time upon graduation. So I didn't even get to teach a full year because we already had to go online. We already done school of the year pretty much at this time. And this year, you know, the same challenges. We started in class, and even then, enrollment and numbers are down across the school division. But just personally in our classroom, we've had to go online several times due to COVID cases and tracing, just to make sure that our students and staff and families stay safe. And so that's definitely interrupted, you know, the flow of a classroom and the feel, right? You can talk about even like as a land-based program and going places and traveling and being out on the land. It's definitely limited our opportunity to do things because one of the restraints is in our school division is that our students couldn't use public bathrooms really. So how do you go do land-based but don't have, you know, there's only division-owned properties that we could go to, so it limited us so much. And then even the interruptions of, we just had another week week and a bit of where we had to move online. And for a lot of our families and for our students, it's difficult to be able to be at home and then just jump on a class. It's not that easy all the time, of limited resources to not potentially strong internet, to all these various challenges, to then multiple children being at the home to have to sign into their class at the same time. So parents are having to navigate through all these different challenges, plus our students, and then also the mental health impact of it. Not being able to see everyone smile every day, not being able to see those facial expressions that as humans that we need, and know that you care for someone. All you just see is eyes sometimes. So it's definitely been challenging, and it's new, but I hope that as the vaccinations roll out, that we're able to get back to a normal school year, and being able to have the freedom to go do the things that we do as a program. But yeah, it's definitely been hard to keep a flow and to keep a good a safe space, because then our families aren't feeling safe to send their students back, and then attendance, and then different things like that. So then a lot of different challenges when it comes to teaching with COVID, and it's just the way it is right now.
Yeah. So do you do things online, like through Zoom?
Yeah, we use Google Classroom. So when we are doing online classroom, we use our Google Classroom, and we post our schedule, are in contact with the families. And then, if students show up, they show up. But, our we usually see about a 50% decrease in attendance when we move online, just with some of those barriers I spoke about. So it's definitely not ideal, and especially within Indigenous communities, to be socially distant, and not have that social aspect, that family aspect, that kinship aspect, which is so important within our classrooms, in our dynamics within our rooms.
So I know for myself, like for my kids, when when I know it's been a tough week for them, like I just let them miss their online stuff. Like I'm like, right now your mental health is important, and you should take care of yourself. If that's what you need to do, that's a priority instead of schoolwork. So I know that their teachers probably don't like that, but that's the decision I made. you know. Because it's hard on them. It's hard on them during COVID. Like, yeah. So I myself, like when the pandemic started, I I was like, okay, I have time. I was like working as a community liaison. I got laid off because I couldn't visit people in the community anymore. So um, one of the things I told myself was, what's one thing I really wanted to do during this? Like, I get a break now. I can do the things that I've been putting off and putting off. So one of the things is like sewing. I do like sewing, and I wanted to teach my kids Cree, but I took this job on, and hopefully, like after this week, I'll have time again, and I'm hoping to start teaching my kids Cree again. So what are some things that you've been doing during this time?
Well, there's been a real abundance of time. So I've really been able to indulge my love of reading. Like, I've always loved reading, and I try to read a lot of Indigenous literature, but things get busy. You're balancing work and school and family and friends and outdoors. And so I never really read as much as I always wanted to. And then this happened, and like, say I'm waiting 3 days for COVID test results to come back. I can't go anywhere. I can't see anybody. So I've been reading a lot of anthologies, and a lot of stuff that I wouldn't have had time to in another situation. And I thought it would be, I thought if I had a lot of free time, I would just go straight to the music and straight to my instruments and straight to learning. new music, but it was the opposite. It was almost like once I had free time, I put my music and stuff away, and I just enjoyed good books, and I've been loving that. I'm gonna miss it.
For me, it's been one aspect of it is actually getting out on the land and spending time learning. I grew up in the city and didn't have access, to the res to grow up around being on the land and the teachings that come with it, the skills that come with it. And so this last summer, I was actually able to go attend a bow making camp and made a bow for the first time with Kevin Lewis. And so that was a special time for me of not only reclaiming, but then learning a new skill. So that's been something that's really important. And then another big part of, during the pandemic was I was actually Think Indigenous. And that's where I really got involved with my brother, Chris Scribe, and helping when the schools closed down. He had the idea of like, what are our kids going to do in their home? Or what are, we need to make sure that, our kids are learning and we can provide indigenous knowledge and indigenous content. And so I just asked, hey, do you want help with organizing this? And we just started rolling that out, and that became kind of what I did at home. And so we had organized different teachers from all over, sharing their passions, sharing traditional teaching, sharing their story with students. We had different grade levels, and it really grew, and it was really amazing to be a part of, to see how much our community cared and wanted to share, and how much knowledge we have. And so that was kind of like my kind of like the thing I focused on. And then the other aspect of this time, like Tristan was talking about, is that mental health aspect. I was not used to spending that much time alone. I'm a very social person, and not having that, being alone, you start, going crazy a little bit, like what the heck, like being alone or just in your house all the time, or not being able to go visit freely. Also another thing, not being able to go to ceremony and really being around that energy. That was another huge component of it, of also working on myself and really taking that time to really dig deep and really be real in that aspect. And like with everything, it's a journey. But yeah, I was pretty much, what I did was a lot of like land-based reclaiming. And then with Think Indigenous, we grew from 2,000 about likes and follows on Facebook to over 16,000 now. So just in this last year, it's been a pretty special project to be a part of, because it's always continuing to remind people about thinking Indigenous, living Indigenous, and that our systems are valuable, and that they belong, and they're just as relevant as any, if not more, the Western education paradigms. And yeah, that's what I was up to.
Cool. So I think you kind of both touched on the next question, but I find like, even though we're living through this pandemic, I still feel that people are fighting for social change. Like the movements and the activism has not stopped. And so this is kind of like a two-level question. Do you feel now could be the time for a change? Like to change the things that we've been doing? Probably Curtis, in your instance, like in education. And what have you been passionate about, and what are the things that are important to you?
Well, and speaking of activism, Tristan is the fine example of that. The work and the leadership and the commitment of that level of putting his body through that, and not to do it for himself, but to do it for the change he helped create, that wave. And now they passed the bill, the suicide prevention bill, finally. But of course the SAS party was very quiet on that. But that doesn't happen without what Tristan did. And so you talk about activism and true leadership. That's the prime example, and that's why I look up to Tristan so much, because that commitment, and knowing where the heart was behind that. But yeah, our world, our society is, we're getting to a place where we're recognizing the colonial systems, we're recognizing what it's doing to us. It reminds me of an analogy a bicycle. Of, you know, if the more faster you pedal, the faster you're going to go. So how much energy are the colonial systems, or how much energy is being put into them for us to succeed? And if we look across justice, health, education, we see the percentages and we see the disparity. And, you know, that just shows what effort's being put in there. So, you know, people are able to now challenge and push. And we see that through, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement, you know, in the States, and how that and continue to transpire, and how it's, you know, neck and neck. And you see what's going on in across in Alberta with their curriculum and what they're trying to do. And then of course, what, you know, what Tristan did of, you know, bringing awareness. You know, the system is obviously serving who it's supposed to, and it's leaving us behind. And you know, I get frustrated working in a school, seeing our young people suffer with mental health at such a young age. And we have the truths in our traditional knowledge systems. We have the truths in helping understand, you know, our young people know who they are. You know, one of the biggest questions that we start off with, you know, in my program is, "Awina kia, who are you?" And usually students are not really sure, you know, who am I? Who the heck am I? And, you know, and we go through a journey, and the final journey that we go through is, you know, Neheo identity, past, present, and future. So we help them understand, you know, what's going on right now and how did we get here? But then most importantly, empowering them to think about, okay, what is the future going to look like? Where are you passionate about, and what matters to you? But in that fold, it is the time, you know, to, you know, we don't need to depend on these systems anymore. We have sovereignty. We can establish that. And that's what I hope to see in my lifetime is sovereignty being established through justice, through health, and through education, and in the child welfare system, you know, because we, you know, our kids are falling through the cracks, as they like to call it. But, you know, they're falling because they're letting them fall, and they're okay with them failing. And, you know, I even think of the education system I'm working in. You know, our graduation rates in Saskatchewan are 40 some percent. And, you know, according to their standards, that's failing. So I ask, why the hell are we still using the system if it's failing at 40%? So we need to get back to our old ways. And it reminds me of a teaching that was shared with me of Nehiao Mamtinichigan, which means Cree way of thinking, or old way of thinking. And right now, a lot of our people, and it's not to their fault, it's just because of the system and how we're taught, but we're all stuck. Most of us are stuck in a Munia Mamtinichigan, a white way of thinking. And we lose out on so much. And I really try to challenge and ask when it comes to education, you know, how are we actually nurturing our kids spiritually? How are we nurturing them physically, mentally, and emotionally? And, you know, if you put that framework, that foundation upon, you know, any education system, I can guarantee you they're failing in a lot of that. And yeah, that's the work that needs to be done. And that's where my passion is to try to establish and support, you know, the work that's already been done by those before me, to keep pushing it forward, because, you know, it's the systems, you know, killing our young people and continuing to destroy our families. And the only way I believe we can reclaim that is through getting to that Nehel Mamkunichigan and that old way of thinking, but then also, you know, healing. And I believe education will be a part of that healing. You know, our leaders, when they negotiated treaty, our leaders wanted education. It wasn't a bad thing, and education itself is not a bad thing. It's obviously the motive of assimilation behind it, to get our kids, you know, assimilated into the mainstream Canadian politics, just to be consumers. But, you know, that's not our role. Our roles are not just to be consumers and to get a job and sing kumbaya. No, we're protectors. We you know, we're powerful people. And, you know, reminding our young people, reminding our communities that who we are, and that we're valuable. That's why I'm getting fired up here. I'll let just the sorry.
Sure. Well, I think in our particular time where we are now, this present context, it does have a potential to be kind of fertile soil for change. But like all things, there's also a negative side to it. There is a lot of fertile ground for people who suffer with various forms of addictions or intergenerational trauma to be socially isolated from support networks and places where they could laugh and gather and celebrate life with friends. And so I think what's happening now is people are having this opportunity to like explore unhealthy coping mechanisms to the extreme, because it's such like an uninterrupted amount of time. Like I know when CERB happened, there were some people that I know who just partied nonstop because they didn't have to work. School was kind of put on pause, and a lot of life was put on pause, and so they were able to just go into these kind of self-destructive, unhealthy coping mechanisms to extremes where it made them kind of go, okay, I think I need to stop. Alcohol isn't helpful. And it took a while. Like they had that space to kind of indulge that curiosity. So I've had multiple friends that at the beginning of the pandemic, they were like, oh wow, this is like an early spring break. How exciting. It's like we get a holiday right now. And then like say drinking began or marijuana consumption began. And then 5 months down the road, they're cold turkeying it and saying, okay, I think something needs to change. I don't want to waste all this time we're given. And they kind of turned away to other things. So I've seen this kind of healthy use of all of this spare time to kind of reassess, contemplate, look internally, look externally, and decide like what do I want out of life and what have you. So I don't know. I'm proud of my friends that decided alcohol wasn't that helpful for them, and they weren't going to use it to cope with their anxiety, their uncertainty, their possible financial insecurity during layoffs. And I've also kept in touch with my friends who haven't. I'm still friends with people who drink or use unhealthy behaviors because I've known them for a long time and I loved them before this happened, and I'm still there for them, but I'm not in the boat with them. So COVID forced us all into our own canoes, where in some communities we can have one other person from outside the household come in. And so it's like we had to practice social minimalism and decide who's going to come beyond the threshold of my door. They might be a risk. I got to be safe. And so I don't know, it's really neat. But I took the opportunity to do a big walk to Regina, camp on the lawn, and I knew I wasn't disturbing anything that needed to happen there because it was COVID and nothing was booked. But that doesn't necessarily mean that COVID is this perfect utopian time to usher in all new ways of doing things. But if anything, it's giving us space and time to reflect, to plan, and to learn and grow if we choose to. Or stay still and just have some breathing space, which is fine too.
Yeah. Could you tell people, because we have some participants that are coming from different parts of the country or maybe different parts of the world that haven't heard about what your walk was about. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. In June of last year, there was a suicide prevention bill that was brought to the floor in the Legislative Assembly in Saskatchewan, and it was unanimously voted down by the governing majority Saskatchewan party. So 44 people voted against it. So that made me very angry because Saskatchewan has the highest suicide rates per capita. And in northern Saskatchewan, that's currently the leading cause of death for a very large demographic of people. So I thought I should do some kind of public awareness raising response to that. And if anything, I'll make the government look bad before an election, and people will be talking about this issue when they go to vote and call their MLAs. So even if it failed, it would have been a success because it brought this issue forth into the public dialogue, into knowledge, and in a very moving way that was able to appeal to people's empathy and hearts. So I walked to Regina. We set up a teepee And I had a portrait gallery of over 100 photos of people from all over the province of all ages that have taken their lives because of suicide. And what that forced the public to do was to look at this beyond statistics and numbers, to have to look at photos and into the faces of all these different people and see the promise that they represented, the beautiful future that could have been, this unrealized potential. And it was kind of heartbreaking, but moving. And so that's what happened. And we camped for 44 days, just so that people would remember the number 44 people who voted it down. And plus, I thought it was a beautiful number, and that could put a nice end date on our presence on the lawn, because I didn't have any intention of getting dragged off or charged and staying forever. But I knew that there needed to be meaning behind all of it. So that's how come that end date was chosen. So that's what happened. And I believe it was this month that bill was reintroduced to the floor, and it actually passed, and it passed unanimously in its original form. So they didn't just chip away at it, make it a little shell of what it was, and then pass it. It is actually passed as is, which is great.
Great. Yeah, you've been such an inspiration to so many people. I just wanted to say that. I think Evan wanted to come in and ask some questions for a bit, and at the end, I'm gonna get my daughter to come on for like the last 5 or 10 minutes.
So I won't be long, guys. Just want to introduce myself to everybody from right across the different parts of the globe here. I know we have some international. I just wanted to, my name is Evan Chamakis. Evan Chamakis, Nisigason Chatagyo Saraganet Gotunia. I'm from the same place as Valine, the Tamska, Nagakio. I'm shaking hands with all of you. So one of the things that that really struck me in listening to your presentations, I myself am a former FSA and youth representative. 2010, I was on the AFN National Council at that time, and one of the things that I really encourage young people to do was to find their voice, and to many times it's very difficult, to speak the truth, and to have that fire that you've had. You get fired up, Curtis, and Tristan. I'm sure there were many times along your walk where you felt that you were angry, and you had this burning passion that you had a message that you wanted to get out. And a lot of times I think that young people were silenced, and we don't get that opportunity to speak our truths and to have our concerns listened to, and especially during this time of the pandemic. I have I've heard from many students how difficult it is, and especially on the mental health. One of the communities, and several of the communities, actually don't even let their youth leave their reserve. So you can imagine a whole year of young people being forced to stay in their homes and stay in their yards, and even the simple taking our kids to Dairy Queen to have ice cream, or going to 7-Eleven to have a slush. It's those little things that that we miss so much. And for me, I'll tell a quick story. During my travels, I was actually at a conference in Halifax, and we were. It was a sports and recreation conference, and the Conservative government Indigenous sports minister at the time did this whole 1-hour presentation of how the government was spending so many millions of dollars sending Canadians overseas to these third world countries to develop sports programs. And one of the questions that came to mind was, we have these same issues here in our backyards, in our own communities. There's no access to programs. And I stood up in front of a room full of strangers, and I asked Minister what's being done by the government of Canada to address the lack of programs and services in our Indigenous communities. And what the answer was? Come and talk to me after the plenary. I'll make time to speak with you. And so after the session, I go to meet, and I was basically left hanging. So for me, I guess what I wanted to the message that I wanted to share to Tristan is, you know, the world was watching, you know, when you did your walk. It was a very ceremonial. There was ceremony that was a part of it, and you know, it's always important, I guess, for me, both of you, how important it is for young people. What message would you share to encourage more young people to, you know, go back to our ceremonies and to our culture? You know, this is a perfect time for a lot of young people to, you know, visit their gukums and their mushrooms, and you know, to pick up a fiddle and to learn all these, you know, these different forms of art. So, Tristan, if you have a message for the young people, if there's something, you know, that you would like to share, I guess I can turn that question to you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I would like young people to know that when you walk for the right reasons and you have good intentions and good motivations, you're not going to walk alone. You will be helped, you will be supported, and you will be encouraged. So my walk was not just me walking through rain and hail all alone on the side of the highway. People walked with me, people joined us, and not everybody was able to walk the entire journey. Some people came and walked for 2 hours or an hour as we walked on that trail going down. So people will help in what ways they can. And I didn't have any expectations of people who came for what I thought they should do. It was kind of people would come as they were and offer the help that they thought they could give. And so that was important. And I say this because that walk wouldn't have been possible if it wasn't for the people who stepped forward and were able to help in what ways they could. I mean, that includes Perry Bellegarde and Bobby Cameron, who were able to help us secure Eleanor Sunchild as a legal defense when the provincial government took me to court, was trying to hold me in civil contempt and say that we were an illegal presence on the lawn when it was protected by Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So every step of the way, everything could have fell apart. When I left La Ronge, I didn't have a teepee. I didn't have all of the gas money to make it to Regina and eat on the way down. But people stepped forward and people were helping. And why were they helping? Because it benefited us all. It was in the interest of the greater good and health and well-being of our communities and our people. And it was a bridge building. It was an opportunity for the provincial government or the Southern Saskatchewan public to display their solidarity and show that they care. And they did. And sure, we may have some very loud and angry and racist people in our world, in our country, but they're often a minority. They're just a very, very, very loud minority. And I think what makes Canada a strange case is it seems like a lot of those people that really have destructive thinking about Indigenous people, like rotten to the core, they're not as common as we think. They're actually hard to find, but it's just we have the structure of a leftover system and way of handling relationships with Indigenous people that was rotten like that and kind of born from that thinking. So we're in a deconstruction time. We're in a reconfiguration time. And part of what my walk is showing how many of us are kind of dying via hopelessness because this deconstruction is not happening fast enough, because this healing of intergenerational wounds is not happening fast enough. And so part of the walk forward was symbolic, and we're walking out of the history rooted in pain towards a present grounded in a political center. So we're right across the road from the Legislative Assembly. And the last thing we did on the very last day is some of us cut our braids, tied them into a noose and burned it, because we're saying we're leaving behind self-inflicted wounds, and we're leaving behind hopelessness and despair, and we're also doing it in by a symbolic seat of power that was implicit in those past wounds. And so all of that, you have to be able to describe clearly what your ideas are so that people can support them. So to our young people, how are you going to do that if you don't have a voice? How are you going to make others want to help, want to support, want to come up with ideas to further along our healing and use our anger in constructive ways as opposed to destructive ways if you're voiceless and scared to speak up? So I was always a very shy, quiet kid. My grandmother called me Mr. Bean. The only time I talked is with music and I'd have my little fiddle. But last summer, I put all that behind and said, you have to use your voice for this, because you have to tell everybody what you're planning on doing and they might be interested in helping. So it was all about clear, motivated intentions, of fearlessness and the constructive use of the voice, and a gratitude for the community that came forth and the people that were willing to help.
Awesome. Thank you so much for those amazing words, Tristan. I guess my next question for Curtis is, you mentioned some of the work that you've done with Dr. Kevin Lewis out in Minnesota. I know that it's an amazing program, and the work that they do there is, just groundbreaking. What are some of the things that you, I guess, some of your experiences, what are some of the things that stand out?
Well, in speaking of, Kevin Lewis, I couldn't have asked for, it just beautiful how it worked out. I actually had a dream of a big grandmother moon with a bunch of little fires on it. And I usually don't dream. And so I was just like, what the heck? And I went to a Sundance last summer and I asked the elder, what is this dream about? And that elder said, you're going to be around a lot of women. And I was like, what? I was kind of thrown off. I said, what the heck? And it just went on. I said, okay, thank you. Hi. And the next week I was doing consulting to develop the grade 10, the Nehiyao 10 language and land-based program for my school division. And sure enough, Kevin Lewis was there. And I had never met him in person, and just through Think Indigenous. And so I introduced myself, talked to him, and I said, hey, if there's any opportunity, I'd love, to come, Scopios, to come learn and just whatever you need me. And he's like, sure. He's like, come next week. There's a women's gathering. So right away in the back of my mind, I said, okay, I see where this is going. And sure enough, I went, and the first day I was put with an old man, and he said, you're going to learn how to build a sweat lodge today. And so that was that symbolism, those dreams came and it connected me to that story and learned how to have that sweat. And the first day there's 22 women that went in that sweat. And the next day there was only 8. And then the lady was putting the sweat on, said, do you want to come in with us? And so I was like, okay, that'd be cool to go in your sweat that I learned to build. And so there's those 8 escuello, and as soon as they shut that door, I just started weeping. I couldn't, there's too powerful, just that escuello energy, that grandmother energy. And so that was the kind of learning, that took place for me in not only in a spiritual sense, but then the land-based sense. Kevin is such an amazing storyteller, to then, the land-based skills of learning how to build a bow, to the story of the bow, to looking at the language and how that's connected to, it's all in there. And so every time I'm around Kevin, it's just mind blown, and kind of looking at, in terms of what our young people and finding their voices and trying to get back to those old ways. We have to, help create space as adults and use our voices to help, because a lot of our young people don't have access. I never went to a ceremony until I was 23 or 24. So I didn't know, I had no idea about that. And it's been a journey of reclaiming, and since I found that, it's helped me, find myself as well. So, and to be able to be confident and know that, we have a spirit helper with us from the day before we were on earth. Our grandfather, grandmother, our spirit spoke up for us and said, I'm gonna walk with you, I'm gonna help you. And our young people don't usually know that there's somebody with them with their Indian name. And I think that knowledge and those traditional ways is where we're gonna find our healing, and talking about coping and with all the trauma and the pain within our communities. Those lodges are the places we're gonna find ourselves again with our teachings and getting back to those ways. But it's challenging, especially within the urban setting. For me, if I want to go to a sweat, I have to go drive out to Beardy's, and that's 45 minutes, 50 minutes, and so that's not accessible. So we need to be able to find ways where we can help our urban youth, but then also our kids on the reserve, that we can connect them back to those ways. And it has to be leadership and leadership from our young people, but also those in power. Oh, sorry, school bell here at school. But it has to be that leadership to want that. We can't just continue to to get in that capitalistic mindset. And economic development, of course, that's important, and that's going to be a part of it, but we can't forget who we are. Because if we don't know who we are, we're not going to know how to use our voice, and we're not going to be able to stand up for the things we believe in, because then we won't know what to believe in. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Curtis. I just have one more question. This is for the both of you. Just a quick question. I know for me, I got sick of Netflix and Amazon Prime probably about 2 months. I put on about 30 pounds sitting in front of the TV binge watching. So I've been, I guess, getting information through more different forms, listening to podcasts, and I've been really, immersing myself in, storytelling. And one of the ones that I actually heard, Kevin's podcast, there is episode with Two Crees in a Pod. The other one that I've been listening to is Foxing Around. So there's a lot of different podcasts and ways that we get our information out there for young people. What are some of the things you've been listening to online here in the last several months? I guess I'll start with Tristan.
Okay, well, I listened to this podcast called Unlocking Us with Brene Brown, because she has all these different people from like sociological backgrounds talking about trauma and healing and just healthy psychology in a modern human context. And she has all of these authors, and so you get these really great book recommendations with every interview she gives. And I listen to that occasionally. That I'm not like a ride or die all day long, Brene Brown, because I like a lot of different podcasts. I listen to some that are kind of cheesy and not intellectual or informative at all, but kind of like trashy and gossipy, just because I miss socializing and just talking about lighthearted things with people. And so to listen to podcasts like that, I enjoy it. But yes, podcasts, I subscribe to a lot of different media things to read, like the Globe and Mail or the New York Times, the Guardian. And yes, I've just been watching a lot of Netflix and Amazon Prime and stuff like that, which does get a little boring, but for the most part, I alternate between music, podcasts, movies, books, and so with that kind of mixture and buffet of information gathering, I don't stick to one meal. Every day is like a different weird mix depending on the mood.
Yeah, for me, one that I'm listening to currently is Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. And it's how to heal from distant, rejecting, or self-involved parents. And so that one has been, looking at emotional maturity and, talking about my own personal growth and recognizing these things and trying to, develop, and grow as a person. And then another one I listened to was this one. It was called The Journey of Crazy Horse. So hearing, The Journey of Crazy Horse is a really good one. It's an audiobook, and it's just about Lakota history, but then also gets into, Crazy Horse's, ideology, and it's from, a Lakota person. So it's cool because it's from their perspective, from their stories, talking about one of their leaders and how he thought, and getting into the way it talks about how he grew up and how, they would master the bow and shoot grasshoppers versus their like ultimate like training. I'm like, man, I can barely hit a target from 30 feet away and they're shooting grasshoppers. That's been a really interesting one. And then one you mentioned, Two Crees in a Pod, those two women are amazing and they're doing amazing work. So those are the kind of things. And for Netflix, it's tough for me to pick a series. I just get frustrated because usually there's not, people of color or stories that are relevant to me. So I always get frustrated. So I'll usually listen to different lectures. and trying to, again, I know one I've been listening to is from Eve Tuck and Linda T. Smith, and that's like biting the hand that feeds you. So talking about working within a system, but challenging that system at the same time. So those are some of the things. And then another thing that I like to watch is like basketball podcasts. I'm a big basketball fan. So there's a few, like All the Smoke is a really good one. And just a few different sports podcasts is what I like to watch as well.
Awesome. Thank you for that, guys. I guess, Valine here, we have a very special celebration here today. If you can see Valine's beautiful daughter, Danessa, that just so happens to be her birthday today. And we actually had a special request, Tristan. I don't know if you have your instruments or if you're able to, we were hoping to get a birthday song for this young lady here.
Sure, we could do that. I'll be 1 second.
Okay.
I just have to.
So at this time, we do have a couple minutes. We can open up the floor to anybody. If you have any questions for Curtis or Tristan, you can definitely raise your hand, and then we'll get you on.
Hi, I have a question. I'm coming from the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples and Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh territories, what's known as Vancouver, BC, and it's occupied territory. One day I wanted to become a teacher. I'm going to study law, but last year I wanted to study to be a teacher. Now I just want to know, like you all seem very young, and it's very admirable that you're in positions to be teaching things, and I just really love that, and you have good spirits with you, and I just want to know what did it take to get that master's in teaching and to be a teacher now, and how do you maintain that, and and the fiddle teaching, and how did you get involved with that too, and just would like to know more about your teacher roles and what's happening around that. Happy birthday, by the way. Happy birthday.
Thanks.
Cool. Well, it was I got my first vehicle when I got my license, and I needed gas money. So my mom was like, well, just teach fiddle, duh, because there was no fiddle teachers in our town. And I hated the idea. I was like, but kids are so hyper and fiddles are so loud, and how am I going to teach a kid how to play a fiddle tune? And she's like, just make a Facebook post if anybody has fiddles in town and wants a teacher, just charge them, like, I don't know, $10. And I'm like, okay. So I started doing that, and so in the beginning, I'm not going to say like, oh, I was born with a gift to teach and I just have the patience of that turtle from Kung Fu Panda and everything's all good flow, good vibes. Like, no, I made some students cry when I was a high school student, because I would be like, well, let's try it one more time. And it's like their 50th time trying the same little section of notes. And they're like, I can't do it. And so it was kind of like trial and error. I wasn't perfect at first. Nobody is perfect at first. You get the flow of it. You get to connect with individuals and what works for them. My mom and all of my aunties are teachers. I have a cousin who's a teacher. I probably have like 5 teachers in my family. And so they would give me advice here and there. But for the educational side of it, you'd have to talk to Curtis, because I took off and moved to Thompson to teach for a school division here before I was able to finish everything. So I might go back and do that someday eventually, but right now I'm content where I am. But Curtis will tell you all about it.
So in 2015, I applied for the SUNTEP program, and for me, I didn't know who I was, and I was struggling with identity. I knew I wanted, a big passion of mine when it comes to teaching is, being someone that I needed when I was in school. So I never had, Indigenous teachers talk about ceremony, talk about language, talk about identity. I think I had one Indigenous teacher in my high school from grade 9 to 12. And so knowing how much I struggled and some of the things in my own home, for like an example, like my mom going and partying till 2 a.m. and me staying up and not being ready for school, or being really tired at school, and, the teacher not considering or wondering, what could have happened at home. And so for me, I wanted to, a big part of that is providing that safe space, and also being a trusting, loving, uncle and or a big brother to to my students. And teaching is and especially as you learn, it's only my second year, and I didn't even get to teach a full year last year because of COVID. So I'm still brand new at this, and learning to navigate and to get those outcomes for what's important to our identity and for a land-based and language program. So even in my university years, I really struggled, and that's when I started reclaiming. And it wasn't until I was offered this position to develop the Nehiyao 9 language and land-based program, I knew that if I was going to do this and take this role, that I had to go back to that I had to go to ceremony. And that's actually when I got my Indian name and started started sun dancing. And so this will be my third summer of sun dancing, but it's still a journey, and you're still learning and trying to. It's a lot for Indigenous teachers because not only are you trying to fit within a Western education system, but also trying to promote what matters to us, and to protect our young people, to help them understand colonization, to help them know what decolonizing is, and to help them see themselves not in that internalized hatred view. I see a lot of our young people, their hoods up, they're very closed off, very shy, and that's that internal hatred towards ourselves from that racism. So it's kind of, you have to aim to destruct that so they can see themselves for who they are, and then slowly, baby steps, trying to build them up. So my journey as an educator, it's always going to be ongoing. It's learning, and even with the academic side of university, that was difficult, but I couldn't have done it without teachers and professors that understood. I was in a SAFE program, the SUNTEP program. It was mostly all Indigenous teachers, so they understood us, and when you're understood, you feel a lot safer.
We're gonna have to wrap up here pretty soon. I think another session's starting. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. It was nice to see everybody. Yeah!